il y a chaque jour de nouveaux standards, de nouvelles obligations qui apparaissent chez nous, et ça devient de plus en plus difficile de suivre. Et on a commencé avec l'ITSKI, on a l'ITRI, on a le CDE, on a toutes sortes de programmes. Mais je ne vois pas toujours la finalité que nous gagnons à le faire, si ce n'est que le coût, parce que tout ça, ça a un coût. Et pour nous, ça devient difficile. Au CDE, nous participons au CDE, et faisons partie de la CIRGL. Nous avons ici un cas avec un pays qui nous agresse, qui prend nos minerais, et vous connaissez très bien les règles de l'OCDE et de la CIRGL. Mais je n'ai pas entendu l'OCDE se prononcer sur ce cas. Qu'est-ce qui arrive avec nos minerais qui sortent de Roubaïa aujourd'hui? Personne n'en parle. Mais on dit ici qu'il faut respecter les standards et tout ça. Madame du protocole des Nations Unies, je crois qu'elle vient de dire que ce n'est pas... On est en train de faire un autre modèle au niveau des Nations Unies, mais j'ai cru comprendre qu'elle a dit que le côté minier n'était pas encore inclus. Mais cela nous dit toujours que nous avons tous ces protocoles qui sont en train de fleurir, et ça nous pose beaucoup de difficultés à suivre cela. Pour l'ITIE, nous faisons partie de l'ITIE, mais nous sommes un modèle. En fait, je commence à me demander, mais quand on suit, nous sommes bons élèves, qu'est-ce qu'il y a comme en retour pour nous? Qu'est-ce que ça donne? Les mauvais élèves ou ceux qui ne sont pas là, vous avez vous-même parlé qu'il y a tout un marché international qui n'est pas dans le système et qui fonctionne. Mais nous qui sommes là à l'intérieur, nous avons des coûts. Par exemple, à l'ITIE, chaque jour qui passe, mais je vois qu'il y a toujours un nouveau standard. Dans le cas du cadastre minier dans lequel je suis, on nous demande maintenant de publier tous les contrats, les propriétaires des sociétés. Mais les trois quarts des sociétés, quand je vois, elles sont basées chez vous, là-bas, dans les paradis fiscaux. Et comment est-ce que voulez-vous qu'on trouve le vrai détenteur? Donc il faut nous aider, il faut qu'il y ait une coopération. Et je ne la vois pas venir. Et quand on ne fait pas ça, c'est toujours un mauvais point pour nous, mais pourtant c'est des côtés qui devraient être aidés. Et ITIE aujourd'hui a difficile à fonctionner parce que tout ça est mis sur le compte du pays. Donc on entre dans quelque chose, mais c'est beaucoup. Mais ceux qui nous demandent à faire plus ne participent pas. Madame de Simok, avec qui nous travaillons, a dit elle-même, et vous avez fait un point essentiel que vous avez dit, il y a tout ce marché international qui existe. Nous sommes en train de faire, d'essayer d'arriver à respecter toutes les lois, mais il y a d'autres petits consommateurs ou producteurs qui ne sont pas dans le circuit. Mais ça sort de la République démocratique du Congo et c'est difficile à suivre. Pourtant, tout le monde dit on respecte, mais bon, ce sont des électrons libres. Comment est-ce qu'on fait pour résoudre ce problème? On a un problème de financement, on a une situation de guerre. Qu'est-ce que la communauté internationale avec qui nous travaillons peut nous aider à résoudre tous ces problèmes? On donne toutes sortes d'informations. Tous les pays connaissent pratiquement tout ce qu'on a comme production et tout ça, mais au finish, je ne vois pas vraiment quel est le résultat pour nous de participer à tout ça. Si ce n'est que comme certains, carrément ne pas être là et de ne pas avoir toutes ces difficultés que nous sommes en train de connaître. C'était juste quelques remarques que je voulais faire à chaud.
Which is the organization who is in charge of the implementation of the traceability due diligence in the Great Lake region. As this point concerns the DRC, I think I can speak in French. Je n'ai pas vraiment de questions, mais j'ai une interpellation compte tenu de la situation ou du développement des conflits à l'est de la RDC actuellement et son implication dans le secteur minier en général. Nous savons tout ce qui se passe à l'est, principalement dans la province de Nord Kivu, sur la partie Massissi, Roubaïa et Menagoma. C'est horrible ce qui se passe et ça a un impact sur nos chaînes d'approvisionnement. Mais je voulais que ça soit clair que Roubaïa, Goma, Gungu et les autres parties, ce n'est pas seulement la RDC. La RDC est vaste et il y a beaucoup d'autres chaînes d'approvisionnement qui ne sont touchées à rien par rapport au conflit. Donc on doit éviter l'amalgame. Quand on parle de la RDC, on risque de mettre dans le même basket toutes les chaînes d'approvisionnement de la RDC, c'est lié au conflit et ça risque de tuer les business au niveau de la RDC. Même dans la province du Nord Kivu, nous avons Walikale par exemple, n'a rien à voir avec ce qui se passe et il y a la production qui continue de sortir à Walikale et on doit être prudent comme acteur du secteur, ne pas mélanger les minéraux qui sont sous les territoires contrôlés par les rebelles et les minéraux qui sont produits dans les territoires où le gouvernement a encore les contrôles. Le Sud Kivu, nous continuons à avoir des problèmes dans certains sites et c'est la même chose. Il y a beaucoup d'autres sites qui continuent de produire et j'aimerais vraiment insister au niveau des RBI avec leurs membres d'éviter de mettre la RDC dans le même panier pour toute la production qui vient de la Réunion et de la région. Et aussi, je voulais écho l'intervention de Estelle. Le risque est là. On ne va pas éliminer complètement les risques. Mais nous devons travailler ensemble pour faire la mitigation des risques là où c'est possible. Il y a des zones où il y a des risques où on ne peut pas. Où cette décision s'est stoppée et s'est retirée. C'est par exemple la prise des Roubaya et personne ne peut travailler dans ces conditions. On stoppe et on observe, on voit les choses évoluer. Mais il y a des zones où il y a des risques de contamination et d'autres risques qu'on peut travailler comme un corps, discuter et trouver des solutions ensemble. Donc je voulais vraiment sonner l'alarme pour qu'on ne rentre pas dans la situation où il y a l'embargo de fait et ça va tuer des vies des communautés qui vivent et qui dépendent de ces activités pour leur servir. Merci beaucoup.
Monsieur Fortuna Kandé, je suis président de la commission RSE à la Chambre de l'île de la RDC. Je voudrais parler dans le sens qui concerne la responsabilité sociétale des entreprises, tout en étant d'accord avec mes deux prédécesseurs, en ce qui concerne la production de minéraux, comme on vient de le dire, au niveau de Roubaya par exemple, où il se pose maintenant un sérieux problème au niveau des communautés qui y vivent, et ces minéraux sortent, et ces minéraux au vu au sud de tout le monde, au niveau de la communauté internationale. Et là, on ne parle pas de la traçabilité, on ne parle pas des diligences raisonnables quand ça sort de l'autre côté. Mais on veut beaucoup plus s'acharner sur ce qui est à l'intérieur de la RDC. Ça, c'est un. Des deux, le problème que je voudrais beaucoup plus insister, et tout le monde a parlé de ça, c'est en ce qui concerne les entreprises en amont et en aval. Et très souvent, nous parlons des entreprises en amont, qui sont en RDC, mon pays, on produit, où nous sommes en train de faire un effort. On est dans l'initiative l'ITE, on est en train de produire des informations, et je suis très content quand Jeanne a parlé des informations qui sont disponibles, et ces informations font en sorte qu'on ait à prendre des décisions qu'il faut en ce qui concerne la révisitation de certains contrats. Et cela prouve que mon pays est engagé dans cette initiative de la transparence. Mais en ce qui concerne aussi en aval, les utilisateurs finaux, là où les matières premières sont en train de partir, on a un problème, une opacité qui n'est pas son nom en ce qui concerne les informations et leur responsabilité sociétale en ce qui concerne les utilisateurs finaux qui utilisent nos matières premières. Et aujourd'hui, ils continuent à utiliser les matières qui viennent des zones que vous connaissez bien. Et là, ça passe, il n'y a pas de problème. Mais moi, j'insiste sur la responsabilité sociétale des utilisateurs finaux qui sont considérés comme les entreprises en aval. Parce que les entreprises en amont sont en train de faire leur travail et le document, le code règlement minier de mon pays prouve à suffisance comment est-ce qu'on doit prendre en compte, et c'est ça l'intervention de la première question qu'on a posée tout à l'heure, pour associer les communautés à la prise de décision en ce qui concerne leur développement local et durable. Donc, pour ma part, je pense qu'on doit aussi voir les utilisateurs finaux, leur responsabilité sociétale qui est aussi très importante en ce qui concerne le développement local des communautés qui sont impactées. Merci bien.
Sustainable battery value chain by 2030. And I actually wanted to pick up on a couple of comments and the challenges you so simply being outlined on the panel and bring in this product perspective and how the product value chain can actually help bring some of that purpose to the transparency and also contribute to creating an incentive structure to go through all of these extra loops and to elevate responsible practices. So what we've been working on with our members, which include mining companies, cell manufacturers, automotive OEMs, recyclers, but also NGOs, public sector organizations, academia, and others, is to see how do we make these standards, responsible standards, due diligence frameworks applicable through the value chain at the product level, but then also turn it into actionable insights for consumers, for procurement divisions, for investors. So using these traceability frameworks that Ben outlined, there's multiple standards emerging, multiple initiatives, and notably for batteries, that of a digital product passport that contains traceability information and provenance data. How do we integrate that with consistent reporting on sustainability performance expectations that are anchored in applicable standard and that interact with multiple standards to really reflect these realities? Score that performance and ultimately issue a product-level sustainability certification that can make all of this data actionable and link the end audience back to that value chain. And we've highlighted this a couple of times already. So just last year we worked with 10 cell manufacturers, mostly based in China and Korea, who mobilized their value chains from mine to OEM and to the vehicle manufacturers to already report against 7 performance metrics, including, by the way, indigenous people's rights that we've also included, and then be able to have this differentiated scores applied to the product level. So I just wanted to send that as a sort of message of hope that I believe there's a big role to play for the product level in driving meaningful change and in also generating a demand where these products can compete based on sustainability metrics, so that it's not just a box-ticking exercise, but you actually generate demand, you create a market for this elusive green premium so that you also have a tangible incentive structure to actually reward companies that are doing more. Because even though, of course, it is an obligation and a moral obligation, we do need to have a business case for it. It's the reality, and this is the sort of contribution that we're trying to make in a multi-stakeholder sector. So, thanks so much.
Administratively and logistically with regards to data collection and data sharing, just wanted to ask a question specifically about how data and mechanisms can be used to address corruption. And one of you has mentioned the beneficial ownership and how data can be used to eliminate bad actors at the earlier processes. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about the extent to which corruption is occurring at different parts of the value chain and how data solutions and mechanisms can be used to start to address some of those issues. Thank you.
And I want to highlight 2 points there. One is that we closed the recommendations document with a strong call to all stakeholders to uphold the rights of indigenous peoples in the energy transition mineral supply chain, including the free, prior and informed consent and the self-determination, which are core to respect and ensure the respect of indigenous peoples. Second point, at the panel, our position was more than only greenhouse gases and carbon reduction. It was a systemic perspective. We brought to the table the discussion that we do not only need to reduce carbon emissions, we need to protect our Mother Earth. We need to protect Pachamama, Mother Earth, because even as Johan Rockström, the rockstar of the planetary boundaries, very clearly says, even if we succeed in our approach to reducing carbon dioxide, we will fail if we have heart and if we have not ensured the resilience of the working of our planet. And that is nature. And indigenous peoples are protectors of most of the biodiversity that is remaining in the world, and we see that on the ground. Having said that, I want also to highlight that Yuan, thank you so much, mentioned the importance of stakeholders. But I miss that rights holders are mentioned. Rights holders are not stakeholders alone. Rights holders have rights, and especially indigenous people. We are not only stakeholders, we are rights holders, we have rights, and also we have responsibilities. We feel strongly responsible to keep Mother Earth. So I would like to ask the community to, in the conversation, always include the rights holders, specifically indigenous peoples, other rights holders, and also many other local communities that are affected on the ground. Second, Fabiana mentioned 2 points. One on purpose, what's the purpose of the transparency? And for us, the purpose is actually ensuring indigenous people's rights, ensuring human rights, and ensuring the working of the planet. And for that, I want to ask, what are the criteria, what are the indicators, what are the safeguards you are taking in your frameworks to ensure that indigenous peoples are included, as well as other rights holders and local affected communities, and how, in which way their rights are being ensured in your frameworks when you build the transparency and due diligence frameworks. And also, you have mentioned that you have, Fabiana, you have mentioned that you don't have to take for granted that companies understand the needs for information. I want to say that you don't have to.
And actually, we also get asked also by, when you talk about community and the company, it seems that they have the same voice, right? But the community, they have different voices, and also within the company. So the normal question will get asked by the top management and by different department, and as the same as the other companies, is they're framing if you you get a copper mark, and if you get the LME certified. So I think that's what's the is a common concern, and we do think it will be very helpful if that pricing mechanism is established. So it's not just an incentive for, it's for the whole industry. So can also scale up the middle and small mining companies to provide a more responsible behavior. Yeah.
Thanks. So it sounds like you see things heading in the right direction, but there's still a pretty significant segment of the supply chain that may not face the same pressures you do in terms of meeting ESG, RBC expectations, right? There's still a market for minerals that may not have been as responsibly produced.
I think that would be a question for the middle stream. I didn't really get your question as well.
Sorry, I mean, in order for there to actually be, for your peer companies, for other companies producing cobalt that may not be as large or may not be producing particularly responsibly, there's still a market for their minerals. So they're still buyers of minerals that haven't been produced as responsibly. And therefore, I'm trying to get your views on why or what needs to change so that they're under the same pressures that you are in order to produce responsibly.
Yeah, that's what we see in many countries. So we do think it could be improved, so it's more fair for the companies who behave responsibly. So, yeah, we do see that is the case.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, of course, that really goes to the heart of due diligence and that's why, we're not only focused on responsible business conduct at the mine site, because if we were, then we might be applauding or commending responsible projects with there still being a market, a sizable international market for irresponsibly produced minerals. And so that goes to the whole of supply chain nature of due diligence. So I want to turn back to you, Fabiana, for some reactions to that in terms of, where some of the missed opportunities for leverage may lie in terms of making sure that all companies are subject to the same pressures, but constructive pressures when it comes to the way that the downstream is engaging. I'm wondering, of course, the RMI, you've had smelter engagement teams where you've brought different engaged RMI members to sort of to liaise directly with smelters and refiners. I'm wondering could that model be enhanced or expanded in order to address some of Celia's concerns?
That's an interesting question. I think the pressure on certain companies and on certain materials and on certain region comes from risk prioritization. So we cannot expect companies to focus on all minerals at once, on all geographies at once. It's going to be very difficult to expect that. So in line with what the OECD guidance and the UNGP say, the first thing we recommend the companies is to do risk prioritization. And for some materials will rank up. Like they will be up in the prioritization list because of the risks that are reported, because of grievances that are communicated by civil society, because of the engagement we have with different stakeholders that feed this information to us and to our members. So some materials in some countries will always rank high in the prioritization list, which means that some materials it's not that they are not on their radar, but they will inevitably receive less pressure than the priority ones. They will come to that, they will focus on those materials, they will progressively. So what is important to do, and you said that, I picked on that point, I found it very interesting. We are asked certain questions and then they disappear, right? I want to take it, I said it at the beginning, right? So let's look at what happened over the last 20 years. And I feel looking at what we did at the RMI in the first 10 years of its existence is important in this case. In the first 10 years, the first thing that companies needed to do was to identify pinch points. At the beginning, every company was doing it in its own way. Everybody was sending around forms, and I'm sure that drove crazy many companies upstream. But at some point, the industry downstream sat together and said, you know what? Let's agree on one single form that will fly around. And it's probably the most used mineral reporting template in the industry, right? That reduced the numbers of forms that were flying around in order to map the supply chain and identify pinch points. What is happening now? That has been stretched. And companies that in the downstream were asking questions to just a section of the supply chain, processors and refiners, now they have to cover the full supply chain. So there is a reflection that we need to now make is that we are in a different point in time. Do we need to create another voice, a cohesive voice when engaging with upstream actors, and also another modus operandi? I feel like there is a way of working also that needs to be an education on how to engage with upstream counterparties. I have to admit, we are on a journey. So, and we are trying to get our head around this, how to do this meaningfully, and how to align the way of working on this specific topic. So I'm not saying that we couldn't figure it out. But it's definitely a discussion on the table, and some people that are here in the audience know that it's an active topic of conversation in some of our working groups. How do we engage meaningfully with upstream actors, and if we ask something, we just don't disappear, but we support the flow of information, and it doesn't just remain at data points on a piece of paper, but it feeds in proper due diligence assessment. So that's how we are at this stage, where we are at this stage.
Yes, Joanne, you'd like to react to, and curious to hear your take on the fact that the EITI has multi-stakeholder groups, including the private sector. So probably have a perspective on that too.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to come back in. So I think there's some really important points being made here, particularly around creating in some sense, level playing field for responsible investment. I do think, though, if we're having a conversation about creating incentives for companies to operate responsibly, then I'm not quite sure we're in the right conversation. I think we do have to acknowledge that companies need to be operating in a way that's socially, environmentally, economically responsible, and that acknowledges that benefits have to flow back to citizens in resource-endowed countries. And I think that perhaps draws up on some of the points that were made by Matthew in his introduction around the sort of approach of the LME to incentivizing responsible investment and working with companies who are prepared to acknowledge and integrate those principles into how they operate. So I do think that's an important starting point. And without acknowledging that starting point, I think companies may expose themselves to really quite critical operational risks as well. We all know about the importance of social license to operate. So how do we keep nurturing that social license? That's by continually helping communities understand and benefit from the presence of mining companies on the ground. So making those linkages is really important, and not just thinking about the incentives that might accrue to companies that are operating responsibly. That needs to be done because there's a business case to do it.
Thanks, Joanne. And I think that also goes back to a sort of fundamental duality in standards on responsible business conduct. So on the one hand, they're conceived to mitigate harm, to address adverse impacts, but on the other, they're also intended to be tools to enable more positive contributions by business to sustainable development. So sort of a mix of addressing the negative and enabling the positive, and I think our hope would be this more rigorous and exhaustive data on what's happening in terms of payments to government and actually benefits to mining communities. That could serve as an example perhaps for other risk areas as well, where we can continue to strengthen kind of the data ecosystem, so that instead of downstream companies simply approaching this as a compliance exercise, and I know not all are doing that, but we still continue to have those pain points. Instead of looking at it that way, you know, maybe taking a more holistic, longer term view of the supply chains and the business relationships they're tied to see exactly how they're contributing to sustainable development and try to enable that in a positive way. So in keeping with the way we imagined this session being as interactive as possible, I know there are a lot of stakeholders out there in the room that have had direct experiences with this issue, are practitioners or in the supply chain or working on tools or systems to enable due diligence and this more constructive information flow on risks that we have in mind here. So I want to give the floor to those in the room, and yes, great, I see a woman in red there, and I may put some on the spot as well, our plants.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, now it's okay. Good morning. Thank you so much for this